Hey, this is Chandler for Melda Production, and today I'm going to show you how you can use the Transient feature in the dynamic EQs. I'm going to be using MAutodynamicEQ, but this also applies to MDynamicEQ and even other plugins such as MCabinet that have a dynamic EQ feature in them. There's actually quite a few, so this applies to all of them. In case you're wondering what I'm talking about, inside each band here, there's actually a transient feature. So if you right-click it here, you see this, it says transient. This is, I guess, somewhat new, maybe about a year old or so, but I don't think anybody has explained this. Inside of this dynamic section, there's actually a transient detector, and you can use this to look at the transient, and now we can reduce that dynamically, like you can like any other signal. But what's good about this is instead of doing the whole signal, it will only do a specific frequency band. So this can be useful for lots of different situations. And sometimes it can work better than just the normal dynamic section. So I'll show you how to do that. I have a drum loop here, basic drum loop, and I'll show you how to use this first, and I'll try to explain why you might want to do this as opposed to using the normal dynamic EQ. So first, if we want to find it, turn on the analyzer, and we can use this visually to find the peak with the bass drum. If you can't find it that way, or you want to just use your ears, use the auto listen, and let's move this around till we find, that thump. Okay, now we're going to use band 4 because that was already open. I'll move the gain back to 0. And if we turn the dynamics on, let's just move this down. You can see and hear what it's doing. So you can move the dynamics down, and that's going to do more to reduce the gain. But if you have a somewhat weak signal, one of the problems is you're going to be like, hey, that's not enough, it's not reducing it enough, and you can use the level gain here to reduce it. Now we can do the exact same thing with the transient, and we can even blend between them. So if we move the transient up to 100%, and we'll do the same thing with the dynamics. Now here you see it's kind of weak. You're thinking, oh, just use a level gain or use the attack or release, but these actually won't work with the transient section. You're probably thinking, oh my God, how am I supposed to fix this if I can't get the gain any higher? But what you actually have to do is use the input and output gain. The way I recommend you do this is turn the output down first, then turn the input up to the exact same level. So let's say I do -20 on the output, I'll use +20 for the input. So if I have nothing on, like I turn this off, it should be exactly the same input and output. No processing, easy to understand. Now if I turn this back on, make sure the gain is at 0, and I have the transient here, now you should see more gain being reduced here. Now that might be too much for you. In that case, just turn down the dynamics here. Another thing you might notice is the output now is a little bit lower. So what you can do is just move the output up until it matches the input. Now, that's about the same, I would say. You can adjust it, more if you want, or you can use the set button here. Now, what we're going to do is just do a bypass, and so you can hear it before and after. So this is before. So you see we're dynamically reducing it, But what you don't hear is it's not completely killing the low end. If I use just the normal one here, like this, move this down here, and use the dynamics, we might have a little bit more control, but that initial transient sometimes isn't being caught. Whereas the other one, I'm just reducing the transient. So if you want that initial hit to be gone, you can do that. And I think it's a little bit more transparent. Sometimes I even like to do it like in the mid-range. So it's like, it's a little bit too boxy here. We can move this around. We can find that boxy frequency and use it to reduce the transient as opposed to using the normal dynamic EQ. There I'm finding like the bass drum and the snare are a little bit boxy right there. And we'll do the exact same thing with the transient. As I said before, move the output down. Let's just try negative 15 here. 15, have it all the way on transient like this. To me, that cleans it up, but it doesn't sound like an obvious EQ. You can still hear that lower mids, but just the initial transient, it's gone. So I think it's useful for something like that. And I'll show you one more example. Let's go here and just have quick guitar example. So let's say you're doing something like a heavy metal or something. I have a sloppy example here, but this is just me, playing a low on a 7-string. So you hear that low sound, it's like, whoa, this is way too low. I'm getting too much low end. And we can do the exact same thing. I'll turn this off for a second. And just move this around till we can find that low end where it's, just too much. And we'll do the exact same thing. Make sure this output, let's say negative 15, 15. You can use whatever number you want here. On the gain, make sure it's at 0. Have it all the way on transient. Let's try moving the dynamics down. Now here, I'm getting that, but you're noticing it's like, it's not reducing the bass as much as I want. Maybe I want something a little bit longer. And that's when you can use this knob, go from transient to the initial detector here. So let's just move it down a little bit. So now let's hear it before and after. You can set that however you want. That's maybe not so noticeable. Let's actually increase this so you can hear it a little bit more, like this. Still mostly transient, but you're hearing a little bit of the original detector in here too. So those initial palm mutes, we're really getting rid of that low end, so it's not so flubby, and you're not getting too much of that low sound. You don't want that, especially it might interfere with your, let's say, your bass drum or your actual bass guitar. So you can do that, and it works dynamically, so this way it's not harming the rest of your signal. So if you're playing really lightly on a low string, it's not going to do anything, or if you're playing high notes, it's not going to do anything to that. All it's going to do is just reduce the low end dynamically. So that's something that is a somewhat new feature with the dynamic EQs in Melda production. As I said, it's not just MAutodynamicEQ, it's MDynamicEQ and a lot of other plugins that have dynamic EQ features. So check all those out. If you have any questions, leave those down below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that, and give me a thumbs up. And make sure to check out all the other plugins at meldaproduction.com. Till next time, see you.